Perfect Turd Podcast, episode 52, Lamar. We have a very special guest, directed some of my favorite movies,
Yes.
American Ninja 1 and 2, Revenge of the Ninja, we got to talk about. I love that movie. Mr. Sam Firstenberg, thank you for joining us.
Welcome to our
Hey,
podcast, sir. Thank you.
thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So, just to start off, with the movies that you've done, what got you into film? Like, what made you want to be part of like the filmmaking process?
That's a, that's a hard question to answer because I don't have a precise answer. I was a kid and I lived in a neighborhood. I'm from Jerusalem. I lived in a neighborhood, not in the center of town. And there was a neighborhood theater, like in many neighborhoods all over the world. So it was our theater, our movie theater, the neighborhood. And since I remember myself, I used to go to daytime matinees, double movies, two movies for one ticket. And that's why I grew up. And I grew up with a lot of mainly American movies, mostly, and other movies, Italians, but even Indian, Persians, you name it. And I just, as a kid, I fell in love in this form of storytelling.
Okay.
Everybody likes storytelling, stories. Everybody, but I was drawn to this visual type of storytelling. And you can imagine, as you guys remember, every viewer knows, when you're a little kid, you don't understand everything in the movie, but this form, this magical power of transforming you from one reality to another world. So it doesn't matter if it was Tarzan or Hercules movie or some Hollywood musical, you were transformed to another world. And I was the type of kid that I was one of those kids who came back to the neighborhood and told the other kids the story, the movie that I saw. I was the one sitting in the center telling the movie. So I guess that's all. Of course, then I grew up. I started to understand cinema. I started to see adolescents, teenager. I started to see more movies, and I understood, and I always liked American cinema the best, more than any other type of cinema around the world. And at some point, I was 21, I made the decision that I'm going to study filmmaking, that I will be a storyteller, a visual storyteller, a movie maker.
Cool. So you came over and you went to film school here, or did you just start making films?
No. So what I did, I wasn't one of those kids who already, first of all, we didn't have video at the time. I grew up in 1950s, 1960s. So there was no videos to make a movie by yourself, 8mm film with those cameras. So I had some, but I never was into storytelling before, visual storytelling, making a movie. And I served in the military in Israel. It's mandatory, 3 years military. And as I finished my service, I was 21 years old. I said, okay, I'm going to Hollywood. Let's see how they make movies. To film school. I had the opportunity. I came here to Los Angeles.
Okay.
Among other places. And in Los Angeles, among other things that I did as I came here, I was taken to the Universal Studio tour. I said, wow, this is it. I'm here. I understand this. I understand studios. Now I know.
Yeah.
Here they're making movies, and here I want to stay. So I stayed in Los Angeles, and I went to film school, to college, Columbia College Film School. And that's how I started. And I started to learn and understand how you make movies. Because, most of the people in the world, maybe not so much today, there's much more knowledge around the world, but most of people in the world, they believe that movies are made like a play on the stage. You start to filming, shooting it from scene number one, and you progress as you go. People, today there is much more knowledge than when I came here. I went to school, it was 1972. But today there are much more. But most of people in the, and I was one of them. I didn't understand what is the mechanic of making movies. I went to school, and suddenly I met other young people like me, all interested in the same field of making movies or television, the same thing. And wow, finally I was in my environment. I was in my environment, that I understood everybody and everybody understood me. So I felt that this is it, that I'm here. So I went to school and I studied.
And then in particular, because it might have been because of like, you know, that time period, what got you into martial arts film? Because that's what we see a lot of, like, your work has been done in.
So I'll tell you the story, but I'll tell you right away, it was an accident. It was some kind of a meeting between my film career and martial art, some kind of a conjunction, some kind of a meeting that happened accidentally. I went to film school, as I mentioned, and I already started to, in film school, make short movies. And then I met, right there in 1970s, I met the producer Menachem Golan, which eventually acquired Canon. But at that time, they didn't have Canon. And I asked him to, if I can, you know, a student of film school meets a producer. And I knew his name. I already heard his name because he's a landsman. He's Israeli. I never met him before. And he already made many movies. So I asked him, and he was producing and directing a movie here in Hollywood. The name of the movie was, he was producing a movie right here in Hollywood. The name of the movie was Lepke with Tony Curtis. So I asked him to join in the production, if I can work with him. He agreed, and that's how I got into feature film, into major feature film. I started at the bottom of the ladder, like serving coffee and doing whatever, moving chairs.
Right.
And slowly I moved up. And this was my introduction into the world of working in movies, in features. And I worked my way. I understood, and people told me, I have to be an assistant director. If I want to eventually become a director, it's a good way to be an assistant director. So I started, and I moved from one movie to another with them, with Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, the producers, and with others. And I became assistant director. And at some point, for 5 years, I was assistant director, and I was tired of it. I really wanted to make movies. I came back to graduate school here in Los Angeles, Loyola Marymount University. And while in graduate school, I produced a movie. I wrote, directed, and with a friend produced a movie, One More Chance. That's the name of the movie. By then, then it was already 1980, the year 1980. And Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus acquired a small company, a film company from New York, was called Canon Film. This was a company that made a lot of low budget exploitation movies, really.
Oh, yes.
Sexual, they used to call TNA movies, exploitation. So they bought the company in New York. They moved it right away to Los Angeles. And they were looking for different type of movies to produce in this company. They had little money because they had a few successes, and they started with horror pictures. And New Year Evil, I don't remember the other title. They didn't really succeed in this field of horror picture. Those producers, Menachem Golan, Yoram Globus. And then they moved to action. Action was actually a field that they understood very well. And I brought to them, to distribution, this movie that I directed, One More Chance, and they accepted it for distribution. They helped me with financing, of course, to finish the movie, and they distributed the movie. And while I was there in the offices, there were small offices in Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and suddenly they produced a movie that was called Enter the Ninja,
right, with
Franco Nero. And Menachem Golan himself, which is also, he's a director, he directed the movie in the Philippines. Franco Nero and Mike Stone was. And the movie was successful, had a financial success. And they understood they have to be in action, in the world of action. They are good in this world. And so, of course, it made money, so they wanted to do a sequel immediately. By then, we finished with One More Chance. It went to some festivals, Chicago Film Festival, and so it was a movie. And I proved myself that I can make a movie as a director. I can tell a story can tell a visual story. I can put together 90 minutes of a story, beginning, middle, end, make sense. I'm not crazy. Okay, so they wanted to do immediately another movie. And the star of this movie was the villain they took the villain from Enter the Ninja, Mr. Sho Kosugi, master of martial art, and they wanted to make a movie with him as a hero, this time as a hero. And Menachem Golan himself didn't want to do another movie. He was the company started to expand, and he was probably busy. I don't know the reason. He didn't want to go again. He didn't want to do another movie, and it just, as I mentioned, by accident, almost by accident, he turned to me. I just finished, as I said. He turned to me and said, "Would you direct for us another movie? We are doing Revenge of the Ninja." By then, I saw Enter the Ninja, so I understood a little bit. And I said, "Of course, I'm a young film student, aspiring movie maker. What am I going to reject such an offer?" I said, "Of course, I'll do it. Right. No problem." But he asked me, "But there is a big problem. It's an action movie. Can you do an action movie?" "Don't worry, I will do an action movie." I didn't have any clue, very little. Only as a viewer, I know as a spectator, I know action movies, James Bond, etc. And that's how I met. That's how martial art and my career intersected. And from that point on, I suddenly, after the movie, you might ask me, the Revenge of the Ninja was successful, and then I was hired again and again to do martial art movies. But I don't come from this world. I'm not a martial artist myself. Right. And something interesting else, I was not familiar with the Hong Kong kung fu movies at that point at all. I was familiar with samurai movies. With being a film student and film enthusiast, I loved Akira Kurosawa, like many film students. I knew all, I was familiar with Yojimbo and Seven Samurai, of course, and all the samurai movies. I love them. But I've never seen a Hong Kong Kung Fu movie. I was introduced to Sho Kosugi, of course. He's the star of the movie. And Sho Kosugi realized I have no clue, I have no ideas about this field of martial art. So Sho Kosugi took me under his wings, and he was my mentor. He taught me everything that I know about martial art. Specifically ninja, nobody knew ninja. Ninja was very obscure subject within the world of martial art movies.
Really?
And wow. He introduced me, basically. Awesome. So that's how it came.
Yeah, it's cool. It's because Revenge of the Ninja's got some of the best fight scenes and the chase scene with the truck. So when you're working on those kinds of movies, like what challenges are there working with martial arts and action and choreography and all of that? Especially since you said you were new to it all at the time.
So as I mentioned, I was a film goer and film lover. And of course I saw, World War II movies. Westerns are action movies, basically. The story with a lot of action happening, chases and gunfights, etc. James Bond, of course, James Bond, and the like of James Bond. And I've mentioned those historic Italian historical spectacles, with Hercules and the gladiators. So all of this is action as a viewer, as a movie goer. And it just so happened that I never saw a martial art movie. So when I was presented with this idea, my thought was, okay, I'm going to make an action movie. I don't care if the action is martial art. I don't want to say I don't care, but I don't mind if it's a martial art or Western action or gladiator action or World War II action. They're all basically, the action sequences are the same. So an action movie is a story, kind of a story that chains together action sequences. If it's a real action movie, if it's not only one sequence of action, So this was my decision right away. I'm going to make a movie one of our decisions, we are going to have 45 minutes of action. At least 50% of the movie will be action. And there is a story, of course, that strings along, that puts together the action sequences. And now as a film student, if you understand the language of cinema, so you basically understand how action sequences are put together. And it was within me. So when I was given this script of Revenge of the Ninja, we took all the action sequences, and I know wasn't myself. Creating action is not only the director. A director of action movie is not alone. There is a stunt coordinator, stunt fight choreographer. There are special effect people. So there is a team that put together an action. So I was lucky enough to have two martial artists at my right and left. One was Sho Kosugi, that he was the star of the movie, and he was already given, it was given that he's the fight choreographer. And I had a very talented stunt coordinator, which was also a martial artist, Steve Lambert, and he was in charge of the action. So that's why I saw it. The movie, I didn't want to, one more thing. Sho Kosugi, as part of my education, so to speak, he showed me a lot of those kung fu Chinese movies. Not a lot, but funny enough, in Los Angeles, there are neighborhoods of Chinese-speaking, Chinese population. And Sho is, though he's Japanese, but he's very familiar with the Chinese and the martial art movies, etc. So he took me to see those movies in theaters in the Chinese neighborhood where they don't have subtitles at all. So I watched movies in Chinese, but of course the action. The main thing is to watch the action and to see how it's put together, how they put together action sequences. So we are now dealing with and so I understood immediately. I kind of instinctively understood that I don't want to make a Hong Kong type of a movie. We cannot compete with them. They are so good. They are making what they are doing is so good. And our job is also to introduce those movies, canon movies, to the Western world, to a Western audience, and it's hard to digest. Not everybody can digest those Chinese movies, the Hong Kong movies. In general, when you talk about general audience, general crowd, you have to be enthusiastic about it. So I immediately made the decision that we are going to make a mixture, a hybrid of little bit martial art, little bit James Bond. Mix them together, kind of put them in a blender. James Bond, and so there will be an action, there will be a martial art, there will be fight, but we'll have also chases, we'll have gunshots, So luckily, Sho Kosugi was with me in the same way. He wanted the same kind of movies. And of course, the other gentleman, Steve Lambert, he came from the world of action movies. So right away, we knew that we are going to make this kind of hybrid movies. And the action sequences, I started to work on the action sequences in pre-production, which means actually storyboarding. It's this process of drawing every frame, every different angle of the action as the action progresses.
Right.
And it's a work done with the storyboard artist, with the stunt coordinator, with a fight choreographer, with myself, and we are building the fight. And so a lot of problem, you're talking about the challenge, a lot of the problem, we try to foresee the problem or the challenges, not necessarily problem, but the challenges, how to solve different things. Somebody breaks into the windshield of the car. How do we do it? So questions are coming up. How do you solve them? Sho Kosugi is dragging behind the car in a chase. How do you build? How you do it? Things like that. So every little challenge within the action sequence is being discussed in meetings, and how do you solve it? And there is also special effect department, which are the assistants of the stunt department. And all together, you come up with solutions, or the team, not myself, the team comes up with solution. How do you solve it? And my job as a director to oversee, to make sure, in my mind, I have to keep in my mind one thing: the action sequence have to be exciting, has to be engaging, has to be consuming the audience. this is my job. Many people are busy with either the technical side, or let's say Sho Kosugi is busy with the aesthetic side of the fight, how it will look great. My job is to make sure it's exciting,
Right.
engaging piece of cinema, which is 7 minutes, 4 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes. As you know, the ending of Revenge of the Ninja is much longer than 10 minutes action sequence.
It's great. It's great. And the little kid in there was like, he was really good with the martial arts too. Kane.
Ken Kasugi, he became a star in his own right later on in Japan. Big star in Japan. He is Sho's son, really, and Sho trained him from a very young age. But this is a little bit, it's a humor relief. You know, a movie cannot be, that's, by the way, they do a lot in the Hong Kong movies. A movie cannot be serious. I mean, it can be, but not the type of movie that I want to direct.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't want to make a movie serious. So then you need kind of comical relief and nice moments. So then Ken Kasugi provides it. There is a nice fight with him and the kids and with the bullies in the park. A little bit comical relief.
Yep.
And so I guess blending like the actual cultures, because I see that a lot in the American ninja movies. Now, you have, of course, Michael Dudikoff. Like, he wasn't a martial artist. How did that come into play? Because that's kind of a different thing where you have somebody who's experienced and then you kind of have like a rising star. How does that come into play, like with doing American Ninja?
And every independent company, this was not the only independent company in Hollywood. There are other, Corelco, PM Entertainment, other companies all around. And every one of those independent companies, their dream is that a major studio will distribute the movie that they produce.
Right.
Because distribution, especially in America, is very difficult mechanism to distribute a movie in North America, Canada, and US. So those companies, they sell their movies to foreign distributors, but in America, they prefer to have the movie distributed in theater. And if the movie plays in theater, especially distributed by a major company, then it's better for their foreign sales. They make more money selling it to other countries. Exactly. So every company, so Canon at the beginning was trying the small movies that they produced in the beginning, they tried to convince major company to distribute it, but unsuccessfully, because they have the major companies have standard. You're talking Universal, Warner Brothers, they have a standard what they will distribute, and they have to invest a lot of money in distribution as well. It's not the end of the story, making the movie. So Canon was not successful, and then at some point, Revenge of the Ninja was finished, Sho Kosugi, and they showed it around, and MGM, which was at the time major distribution company, picked it up for distribution. So this was a big event in the history of Canon film. Finally, a major company is willing to distribute one of the movies, and MGM took it seriously. They opened in, I believe, if I remember correctly, they opened 800 theater, but what they called flip-flop, east of the Mississippi, and they take the 800 prints, move it to the west. So it's not this, it's different times, it's not simultaneously. And campaign, radio, television, ads, beautiful poster, fantastic poster, a very famous poster, Revenge of the Ninja. Sho Kosugi flying in the red skies. And the movie was successful. In New York City, it was at the head of the box office for 2 weeks. So anyway, it made money. Immediately, they want to make a sequel, the company, of course. This is Hollywood, you make money. The company exists to make money, after all. So Menachem Golan came up with Menachem Golan was the head creative person of Canon Film. He called me again, said, okay, this was okay, let's make another one. But for some reason, he didn't want Sho Kosugi to be the hero again. And he said, let's make a story with a woman, a heroine, instead of a hero. Fine with me, it's experimental. Anyway, I'm interested more in so-called action movie, not necessarily martial art. And we went along and we found a dancer, Lucinda Dickey, to star in, and Sho was in the movie. Sho Kosugi and her, Sho has but she's kind of the hero. It's around her, revolved around her. And we made this movie. Was not as successful as Revenge of the Ninja. Was not as successful. but still made money, so they want to make another one, another movie, another
Keep it
sequel.
going.
Nachem Kolan
Yes.
calls me in and he says, and this time he comes up with a bombshell, with an idea. He said, well, let's make another one, but this one I want to make American Ninja. I want the ninja to be American. Now this is totally crazy idea within the context, because this whole ninja thing is Japanese. It's not even Chinese thing. It's a cultural Japanese, belongs to the history of Japan, the mythology of martial art of Japan. And now he wants to make a movie where the hero, the ninja, is not Japanese, but rather American. Everybody thought it's a crazy idea. I really didn't care one way or another. It's his company and it's he wants to do. And for me, it's a challenge to make another type of a movie. So we embarked on the mission. There was no script, there was nothing. There was only title, American Ninja.
Oh, wow.
Later on, I found that they offered it to, by then they already had, Chuck Norris was in contract.
Really?
By then, Chuck Norris was already working for the company, Invasion USA and Missing in Action. They started with Missing in Action. And so they offered it to Chuck Norris, this idea. And there is a poster circulating around in the internet where you see Chuck Norris, American Ninja. He rejected it. At the time, I didn't know. I learned later.
Right.
So they decided to embark on it. There was only idea, and we were a group of myself as a director, two producers, Gideon Amir and Abig Leinberger, and a writer, Paul DeMilke, and the four of us embarked on putting together a script, coming up with a story, American Ninja. Well, there was one stipulation. They probably had some money in the Philippines, or I don't know what. So they told us one of the conditions were that you guys are going to make the movie in the Philippines. So that's all we know. American Ninja going to the Philippines. So we started to build the story. And that's before we get to the Michael Dudikoff thing. So first was the idea, American Ninja. Now I personally, I told you I love American cinema and I believe in American cinema. And the movies that I direct, I try to make them happen in the United States, because I believe that most of the world, in most of the world, they love American movies. Those are the most popular movies. So here there was a challenge. They are sending us to the Philippines. How do we make American movie? And the idea came up altogether. If he is a soldier, at the time there were a lot of, it was 1985. There were a lot of American bases in the Philippines. Navy, military. One of them was huge. Subic Bay, outside Manila, was almost like a city. Huge American base. So anyway, we knew all of this information. Said, okay, if we have a soldier and the other characters are soldiers and they are within an American base, it will look like America in another country, but it will still have the feeling of America. And we started to build a story, and we knew that we wanted this kind of a hero, which is reluctant hero. The American Ninja will be somebody. The structure is a classical drama. He's a reluctant hero. He doesn't want to get involved, like High Noon. The sheriff doesn't want to get involved, but because of his character, the quality of his character, at some point in the story, he has no choice but to take matter into his hand. That's his values, this is his character values, and he gets involved and he's being sucked in, and from this point on, he has no choice but to prevail as the hero. So we knew that this is the type of character, and okay, we wrote a story. Of course, I didn't write, the writer wrote the story, Paul DeMilke. And there was a story, and now we have to find the American Ninja. So we decided on open edition. For one reason, because we wanted also to see martial artists, not only actors. Because we are going to make a martial art movie, and we need a martial artist and new hero. Up to this point, I worked with Sho Kosugi, a master. Yeah. And now I have to work. So we had this open audition, and the first stage of the open auditions were to check them out on the martial art level, if they can perform. We knew that they don't necessarily have to be martial artists, just like Lucinda. Lucinda was a dancer. when we did the movie Revenge of the Ninja, in the audition, in the casting process, we decided either we find a martial artist like Cynthia Rothrock, or we find a dancer and we will teach her.
Yeah.
Not myself, but the people who know how to teach her will teach her what to do. And so it was. So we ended up with a dancer, Lucinda Dickey, and it proved itself. She very easily, she picked up the martial art moves, which are not far away distance from dancing. So we wanted the same thing, either a martial artist or an actor with a background or with a talent to pick up the moves. And so first they went through the martial art examination, let's call it, with Mike Stone. We re-engaged Mike Stone, who was in the movie Revenge of the Ninja, to be with us. And with Steve Lambert, again, the same Steve, stunt coordinator from Revenge of the Ninja and Ninja 3, Steve Lambert. And whoever passed this first test would come in for reading, for acting, right? And they could be either actors from agency or from a martial arts school or from the street, doesn't matter. And we saw like 400 people, young people. So we ended up with 5 candidates. One of them was Michael Dudikoff, because the way we look, and he was not a heavy-duty martial artist. He was not a martial artist, but an actor. I found out by then he had a television series starring the family, and he was in Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks, and he even had a movie coming out that he was starring. Albert Payun, the director, made a movie, Radioactive Dreams, that Michael was the star, but the movie did not come out yet. So he had some experience, and other people, among them was Mike Norris, which I worked with him later in Delta Force, Chad McQueen, other character. Those were 5 finalists. For the part of Jackson, we had one guy, Steve James. That's it. The minute we saw him, and he was a martial artist. Steve was a martial artist. He came in with all his martial arts stuff and reading. We didn't see anyone else. I mean, once we decided that Steve is the Jackson, that's it. So among all those candidates this was very important for me, because this is the heart of the movie. Who is going to be the American Ninja? And among all the candidates, I like the best Michael Dudikoff. I believe that he has this quality of reluctant hero, the guy who doesn't want to get involved, who is chip on the shoulder, and eventually he will explode. And from readings, etc. And so the company eventually agreed with me. And you know, I'm not the only one making the decision. There is a producer. And we agreed that Michael Dudikoff, and because he was not a martial art, he went into some training session with Mike Stone. Mike Stone is a famous martial art champion, the trainer of Elvis Presley. Okay. and the action crew took him under 2 or 3 weeks of training before we all left to the Philippines to make a movie. So that's answers your question, how we ended up with Michael Dudikoff and the idea of American Ninja rather than Japanese Ninja.
Right.
Gotcha.
Well, you mentioned Steve James. Like, Steve seemed like just a big, fun personality. Do you have any great stories about working with him?
You know, Steve, it's so sad that he died so young. But anyway, Steve was bigger than life. First of all, physically.
Right.
Yes.
Strong physically, martial artist. And he had this driving force. He wanted to be the next Black American hero. He wanted to be Shaft. You know, he wanted to be the next Shaft. So, and he was driving, and he was this great body. And I'll tell you this funny story. Every movie, at some point toward the end of the movie, he tears off his shirt and he's shirtless, and he continues. I said, Steve, I didn't tell you to tear off. He said, are you crazy? You know how hard I worked for this body? Or I'm going to waste all the time and not showing it? Of course I have to show it. He said, you have no choice. I have to show this body. So boom, at some point he took off his shirt. Well, he had this muscle, Hercules, and Herculean body. But eventually I made with Steve James a very serious movie. It's called Riverbend. It's a semi-action movie. And because we with Steve, I worked with American Ninja number 2. Then we made the movie Avenging Force, all of them, Michael Dudikoff and Steve James. And eventually, a few years later, I made with Steve another movie which is called Riverbend, which is it's a kind of an action but more serious movie about racial inequality in the South.
And then, so, you know, with everything going on with all the movies, like I guess like at that time period, what do you think of martial arts movies now? Because it seems like there's kind of like, it was like the big action star, big martial artist. Now it's kind of, I won't say forgotten. It's kind of like an underlying theme. Like, it's not like you don't have like the Steven Seagals and the, you know, Jean-Claude Van Damme's. It's kind of like, well, we can put them in training. What do you think of like the genre now of martial arts films?
I will sum it up this way. I think so. The young audience of the martial art movies in general are geared for young audience. Obviously, you know, it has a lot of excitement, a lot of mystery. So it's geared to young audience, young men. It's not necessarily for women and girls, but I'm not excluding this, but this is the main segment, the target audience. The young people of today, they grew up on video games. Their cinematic education, their visual education is video games, which everything moves very fast and everything can happen. The fantasy is beyond what you can imagine. And the modern filmmaking in general, action filmmaking, relies heavily on visual special effect.
Yeah.
So everything is possible. There is no more limit to what can any hero, any machine can do. Of course, also influenced by the superheroes, Batman, Superman, influenced by it. So today action is spectacular in a way that is beyond logic anymore. You know, cars are flying from one building to another building, entering another building. Things like which are not really realistic. Martial art in the last few years also with all kind of optical effect, cables and other stuff reached a level of this kind of fantasy, and it lost the sense of reality of the Hong Kong movies. Because, you know, Hong Kong movies from the 60s, 70s, 80s, everything was done for real. So were our movies. Every piece of action was really performed. There was no little bit piece and bits of flying in the air against green screen, and later on you build it up, or optical effect, computerized, what they call CGI. So this aspect of reality, of urgency was lost in those movies. And the other thing, to answer your question, is those movies, the martial art movies at the time, belonged to the independent companies. Low budget, medium budget, let's say until the Ninja Turtles, which suddenly was much bigger. Right. But eventually, after this, the studios realized, why are we letting those little companies make those movies and make money? We will make those movies. And they took over and they killed the small companies. So now, and a big major studio, they are not in the business of making $5 million budget movies. They jumped to 80 million, 60 million, and everything became big, spectacular. So those movies are beautiful nowadays. And maybe they didn't see much market in only martial art movies. So martial art is now part. So you have you have superhero movies, and martial art creeps in here and there, you know. And people who are trying to still make martial art movie in the Western world, like my friend Isaac Florentine, the director, they're struggling. There is no audience. So maybe the last few movies was Tarantino. This was the end. Maybe, I don't know. With Kill Bill and
Kill Bill, yeah.
And then the martial art moved now into the mainstream as part of the general huge event studio movies, and that's what's happening with all the sequels and all the repeating the same story again and again.
Pretty much.
Remake,
Yeah.
sequels and remake, the world of remake and sequels.
So aside from martial arts movies, I mean, you've blended styles. I mean, Ninja 3 is actually a blend of styles. It's action,
Yes,
martial
it
arts,
is.
horror. But also, a lot of people know you from Breakin' Part 2, and unfortunately, we just lost Shabba.
Rest in peace,
What was it
yeah.
like working with him? He was a tremendous talent, it seems.
So let's mention it. This is so sad that last week we lost Shabba, a great dancer, great talented dancer. I'll tell you, I'll talk about it in a minute. And a humanitarian, not only a dancer, a guy with a very involved in social justice and social consciousness, very involved. So as I said in the beginning, I was not stuck on martial art particularly, but just make movies. I like to make entertaining movies. And the company Canon had their biggest success as a company was the movie Breakin' with Shabba, with Boogaloo Shrimp and Lucinda. When this movie came out, I think it was 1984. This was revolutionary for the company. It was the biggest success they ever had up to this point and to the end of the company. So obviously they want a sequel immediately, make money. So let's make more money. And they came up with this idea, Breakin' 2. And also the word Electric Boogaloo was already attached. For some reason, they did not hire the original director, Joel Silver, who directed Breakin', and they approached me. We just finished, we found Lucinda Dickey, despite the fact that Ninja 3 came after Breakin', but it was filmed before.
Oh.
We found Lucinda for the Ninja movie, and they liked her, so they took her to the Breakin' movie, to the first Breakin' movie. And I was approached. As you say, also, I had a chance in Ninja 3 because I love cinema in general, not particular part of cinema. So even in Ninja 3, the Domination, I was happy to have little bit poltergeist, little bit sorcerer, little bit flash dance, and everything together because I like all those genres of exciting adventure movies and exciting movies. So we blended it because of the type of story. And then suddenly they approach me and they say, okay, we're making a sequel to Breakin'. Can you direct it? And I was very happy. I love music. I love musicals and I love music. And I will tell you the truth is from a mechanical point of view, and think about it because a director to deal with the mechanism for making movies, there is not a huge difference between dance and action. There are choreographed pieces, choreographed fight pieces that the director has to fit into the story. And here you have a choreographed fight dance pieces. I do not choreograph the fight. I do not choreograph the dance. There are choreographers. My job is just to see that they will fit within the general story of the movie, the general atmosphere of the movie, and they will be exciting. That's all. So that's how I view it. I was more than happy to be suddenly involved in action movies. Just like Ninja, I didn't know anything about hip hop culture. I didn't know anything about. And I'll tell you, it's not only me. Before the first movie Breakin' came out, almost no one knew anything about.
It was like a big
hip hop
spectacle.
and breakdance.
Yeah.
And but I was educated. I had Shabba, and I'll talk about him in a second. And there was Billy Goodson was the choreographer. So Shabba was not the choreographer. Shabba brought in. Shabba was the spiritual leader of the movie. That's true. He was the star, the biggest star, the most recognized and famous breakdancer within this culture of the hip hop culture and the street dancing in general. And he brought in Billy Goodson, the choreographer. They worked together. Of course, the other character, he brought Michael Chambers, Boogaloo Shrimp. Lucinda came in as a sequel, and now so on the set we were talking about it. So on the set, Shabba was the guru, was the big guy, also because he was such a talented dancer, and also he was famous. So people would come a lot. It was all shot in the whole movie was filmed in the streets of LA, not in a studio. So we were in the streets every day, and throngs of people would come just to see him, to see the group. And maybe not only him, the group, but he was the star. Shabba was the big star, and he set the tone, the general, how the dances will look. But not only him, as I said, this type of thing needs a crew of people. So he came with with a group of dancers, Pap and Taco, Ana Sanchez. We always were surrounded by 12 dancers. They were always, it was the core group. Then there was a lot of dancers coming in and out accordingly, but there was a core group of dancers, and all together they put together everything, whatever was needed. But he was kind of the undeclared leader, and also the one who educated me about the streets, about the culture, about what's hip hop, etc. And there was one beautiful solo number that he plays on top of the building, on the roof of the building. He's dancing a solo dance, which is so beautiful and shows his talent. And yeah. So for me, it was a pleasure, and I'm happy that such a movie became an iconic movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Iconic of the 80s, a symbol of the 80s, and fun movies, no blood, no violence.
Right. Hey.
only music and dancing.
I like the scene where Turbo was on the. Would you guys use like a rotating set when he was on the ceiling?
So one of the ideas, musical and dance movies are traditionally Hollywood. They're done in the 30s. They go all the way back to the 30s, 1930s. So one day, it was not even in the script. One day, the producer, Menachem Golan, which was very involved. And by the way, this Electric Boogaloo had a bigger budget than the other movies I worked with. It was a decent budget, decent schedule. It was already pre-sold for distribution. And they felt comfortable, so they gave us enough money to make the movie. So one of the ideas, this Menachem Golan, the head of the company, called me one day while we were shooting the movie, not pre-production. And he said, I want to do this thing with the shrimp. He will dance. But of course, this is a Fred Astaire number from the movie Royal Wedding. It was first introduced by Fred Astaire. And he's dancing on set. I understood immediately how you do it, the idea. So you have a set rotating. It's inside it's called gimbal. The two huge, tremendous rings that can roll around, and it goes around and around. Of course, the dancer always dance on the floor, on the down, but the ceiling comes down. The cameraman rotates with the room. All the lights, all the fixtures, everything is glued to the shelves, that nothing will fall. If you have a light, it's actually, so it's upside down, it sticks up. Everything is glued to the set, including the cameraman, within a cage, special cage. The only one who always stays in the bottom is the dancer. But once the camera is upside down, it seems like he's dancing on the ceiling. And it was his solo. We spoke about Shabba had a solo on the roof. This was Michael's solo, sure. And he choreographed it. It's all his ideas, maybe with the help of the choreographer, Billy Goodman. But it was his solo, his idea. He made it together, and the preparation takes a long time. The shooting itself
sounds like it.
2-3 times rotating, and that's it. It's over.
And so, you were talking about with martial arts films, how that's kind of changed. Like it's in every type of film now. And then of course you're talking about, Breakin, and that was kind of like the starter for a lot of other dance movies. Of course we have, a lot more, of course, with COVID, movies are going to be streamed and everything like that. What differences do you foresee in the future with everything streaming? And then, because now it's theaters aren't that big of a deal anymore right now, but where do you see streaming taking things?
So listen, the truth is that streaming did not start because of COVID.
Right.
It seems like the streaming is the new way of distributing entertainment to the people, especially young people. And we went through different things. Theaters are not going to die. There will be always a movie theater because it's a special experience. It's a dating
Easy.
mechanism.
Yes.
It's a place to go and eat popcorn. But it's not going away. It's a different experience. It's a really almost religion experience, theater. But then we had the home video, the cassette, the VHS, the cassette. So everybody went to the corner Friday and brought home 6 cassettes to watch.
Blockbuster. Yep.
And then we had the DVD. And then slowly we started with the cable television. And now we are in the age of streaming and video on demand. And the truth is that young people are used to this idea that they can control the timing of the entertainment. You don't have to go to the theater at 7 o'clock. I want to see the movie at 5:43.
Yes.
That's where I start the movie. And if I want to stop, I stop. I go and bring some sandwich. I continue. So controlling it just became a standard among the young generation that they can control the entertainment. They will control the entertainment at their own convenience. And this works very well with streaming. And once the idea is in, and once it's convenient, and people find it convenient to sit in their living room, and we have big screens today, and bigger screens are coming all the time.
Yes.
In the electronic show, they just introduced a wall, a video wall. You can have now a video wall at any size that you want, any size in your home. So, and it's convenient, and this is the norm. It became the norm. It's cheap. It's very cheap. You go to the theater, you have to pay. You buy a concession. Then you sit at home. How much does it cost to have a monthly Netflix? Not a lot of money. So it's much cheaper, much more convenient, and you can invite friends. So I see that it seems like that this is the future of cinema, television, cinema, visual art. This is the future of visual art, streaming, but it really doesn't mean that it's the end of theater. There is still this feeling special. It will be a special occasion. Okay, let's go out to a theater. The family goes together. We go with friends. It's a date. It's good for dates. And it has this feeling. You go into this dark hall with many other people, tens or hundreds of people. You laugh together. You're scared together. You're excited with a group. So there is a human experience in theater that cannot be replaced by sitting in the couch in your home.
Yeah.
So the theaters are not going away, but obviously it looks like it will diminish. It will be smaller and smaller and smaller as a business, but it will be around. I mean, you open a big movie that comes from a studio, superhero movie, Wonder Woman, whatever. You want to see it in the big theater. The Fast and the Furious. You want to see it in the big theater, the cars flying all over. It's a different excitement, different experience.
So we were talking about, like, we've touched your whole career. Now there's a book out, The Stories from the Trenches.
Yes.
That's...
Oh, wow. That's pictures and everything. Cool.
Huge. Cool. Many photos, good interviews. Yeah, go ahead. You can continue.
No, I mean, that's it. I was wanting to let people know that the book is available.
The writer, publisher, Markus Siedelman, a writer from Germany, he decided to write a book. He called me one day. He wanted to write a book about Canon. And will I help him? I said, I'll help you. No problem. With my knowledge about Canon, I worked a lot. I directed a lot for Canon company. But then he realized it's a huge subject. The Canon is a tremendous subject. Actually, somebody else started to write a movie about Canon, and he only came out with the first volume, and he already knows he needs 3 volumes just to cover. Canon produced more than 400 movies.
Yes.
So Marco started to concentrate on the career of the movie that I made instead of, he said, never mind Canon, it's too big of a subject. Let's concentrate on this one. And the way he goes about it, he doesn't write anything. It's all interviews. And he interviewed me, of course, about the different movies, but he interviewed a lot of people who were involved in this field. And the field that I'm talking about is the independent genre movies of the 1980s and the first half of the 1990s. It was a period of genre movies, action, mainly action, horror, sci-fi. That's basically it is. They were low budget compared to the studio, lower budget, not necessarily very low budget, but lower budget. And the big stars of this genre were Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, Michael Dudikoff. This was the group. And he decided to dedicate to and basically my career more here was within this group. I'm not the only director, you know, Albert Fayons, Steve Carver, many directors part of this genre, this group. And this book is basically, so he interviewed people who were involved in the movies that I made, but producers, and they tell stories not only about the movies that we made. There are many stories about Canon, in general about the Canon company, but other stories that have to do with this era and this type of movies that I've just mentioned. So it's pretty interesting. He ended up with some 700 pages.
Wow.
But it's not all written. It's not all talk. There are many. There are more than 1,000 photos in the book, and it's fun. I think it's anyone who is interested in this era, in this time, with the independent, low-budget genre movies of the Hollywood of the 80s and the 90s. This book is a must.
For sure, yeah. It's available on Amazon. I got my copy on the way. So
I might get my copy too.
You know, one of those books that it goes through Amazon. There's no publisher. No, it's not printed.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. Looks. I can't wait to sit with it because it looks awesome.
Good stories and good anecdote, and you start to understand what was Canon, what was the time.
Yeah.
It's time of Corelco, of PM Entertainment, all those little Shapiro Glickenhaus, all those companies that made those kind of movies based on the money came from the home video. In the beginning, when the home video started, the cassette home video business, the rental started, the studios did not pay attention to it. They didn't believe in it. For them, the money was in theater. Then they sold it to the networks for, you know, again showing. They sold it to the airlines, so you can see it in the airplane. And they didn't see the money in the cassettes, in the home video internet in the beginning. So those companies, all those little companies, they came in, they seized the opportunity. They saw, okay, there is money here. We can make money by making cassette, selling it to the blockbusters, the different type of blockbusters. They will rent it out, you know, all the corner shops, and there was money, and those money fueled those kind of movies, but couldn't be too big of a budget because there was not enough money. There was a certain money. So we made movies for $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, $6 million. This was more or less the budget of those movies in the 80s, which is a nice budget. It's not bad. But then at some point, it was in the mid-90s, the studios realized, why are they making the money? Why? So they started to make True Lies and Predators, which we're talking 25 million, 30 million. You know, it's the same kind of movie, the same movies, but big budget. So they took Van Damme, they took Schwarzenegger, you know, they took Stallone into there.
Yeah.
And they started to make them much bigger. Once the audience saw that the movies, we can see much nicer, much bigger movies. Why do we have to watch those movies? The $5 million, if we can watch the $35 million movies. So this was the history, and the book deals with this. So this field, this era came to a conclusion in the mid-90s, more or less.
Yeah, that's crazy because I know, you know, me and Joe always talk about Bloodsport. That was a canon movie, and that movie is like classic. That made Jean-Claude Van Damme. And a lot of people forget, like, that movie and a lot of other action movies really kind of like put a lot of these action stars that we know from that era on the map, like hard.
Think about Terminator. It was independent
Another
movie.
one.
It was a small independent movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing.
Yep.
What was it like working for Canon as a director? Did they give you a lot of creative control, or, you know, was it pretty loose there? Or?
there are many stories about Canon. You know, as I told you, there are books. I have here 2 books in Spanish. I have this the catalog of Canon that just came out, and he's writing another 2 books. So there are a lot of stories about Canon, positive, negative, but my experience was all positive. Let me tell you. Also in terms of paying me my salary, I never had any problem. I always got the money. Good. But more important is the creative side.
Right.
Canon, within Canon, you know, Canon made also here and there some artistic movies. They tried to do other stuff. But within the major part of Canon was making genre movies. Action, horror, commercial movies. The company existed to make movies in order to make money. And within this frame, with this framework, I never tried to rebel. I didn't try to go out of the frame of Canon. So I made the movies that they liked, and kind of they realized that's what I'm making. So I had a free hand, really. I'm telling you. So the company, they were involved in the idea stage. Menachem Golan, who was the head of the company, he was involved in the ideas. Once the idea was cooked and put together, then I was always let loose, do whatever you want, come back. I knew that they were impressed by action. I always tried to, in every movie that we were filming, I started with an action sequence. Send back to the office an action sequence first, let them see an action. And then they were always pleased with it. And they really never bothered me. I don't remember any time that it came to me with restriction, maybe budgetary, maybe I got screamed at some here and there that I'm going over budget, but I didn't care. This was my job. My job is to go over budget. I'm the director, I'm not the producer, you know. So my job is to make the most spectacular within the frame. You know, I cannot move, I cannot take it from 3 million to 30 million, but, you know, move it from 3 to 3.5. That's fine. And they didn't bother me. They usually got involved again in the editing, in the post-production.
Oh, okay.
So Menachem Golan loved editing. He used to come to the editing room once a week, said, show me a scene, show me something. Can I see a sequence? And okay, here. Why don't you? And most of the movies I made there were edited by the same editor, Michael Duffy. So we already knew the routine. He would come in, and then of course we finished the movie. There was he got involved on the final product. All of the movies were usually more than an hour and a half. When so-called the first cut is usually 120, 110 minutes. Menachem Golan did not like long movies. He believed in 95 minutes movie for commercial reason, but also he believed that you can tell a story more strongly, more condensed when it's 95 minutes. So he got involved at that stage. Usually, he got involved. Let's cut this out. He came with suggestions, but really, to answer your question, my experience in Canon was all positive, in terms of they really let me do whatever I want, and any crazy ideas that we had. Not everything was accomplished. Not every of my craziest idea was accomplished, but we did a lot. We got to did a lot because we were usually far away from the office. The only time that I was here in Los Angeles was Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo, and he was a little bit more involved, but it did not bother me. And same thing with being paid for my work. I didn't have problem. So all in all, we had a positive, and the company was, in general, it was creative. They were really, Menachem Golan was really story man. He really liked good story. He wanted to see good story. It wasn't so much about aesthetics and so much about the art of cinema, but good story that works, and he was good at this field. So probably we probably gelled together.
Right, you were good for each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Well, we've kept you for a while. We don't want to take up your whole Saturday, so
absolutely.
Where's the best place for fans to connect with you? Instagram.
So two areas. I have my own website.
Okay.
SamFirstenberg.com, and Sam Firstenberg, one word, no separation.
Okay.
SamFirstenberg.com. So it's a website that I have photos, stories, all kind of posters, etc., and Facebook page. Sam Firstenberg, where I post all the time, and Instagram. That's it. So there are stories.
Plenty of
and
places.
and there is a Facebook page which is called the battleground, the cinema of Sam Firstenberg, but somebody else maintains it. It's not me.
Oh,
But there is also stories and a lot of posting about the movies, about the actors. Michael Dudikoff, Steve James, Lucinda, Sho Kosugi.
Awesome.
So a lot of catching up. People can go to any of them. And as you mentioned, this is a great book to read about the movies that stories from the trenches. And Facebook.
Cool.
Just if you Google nowadays Sam Firstenberg, a lot of stuff comes up.
Everything
Right on.
comes up. Exactly.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thanks for joining us. We
Yes,
really
very
appreciate it. We had a
informational.
great time.
Thank you, John Lamar. You're great.